The stars shimmered against the inky expanse of space, casting a silvery glow across the observation deck of Sentinel-9. Captain Cale Draven stood with his hands clasped behind his back, violet eyes fixed on the distant nebula that marked the boundary of Sindari Alliance territory. After 15 years of service at this remote outpost, he had memorized every star and celestial body visible from this vantage point. Stability and order. That was what the Sindari stood for. That was what he had dedicated his life to protecting. "Captain Draven," a voice called from behind him, "we're receiving an unusual transmission." Cale turned to face his communications officer, an alien like himself, with the characteristic silver-blue skin and elongated features of their kind. "Source." "The Baltaris system, sir. It appears to be an emergency distress signal." Cale's brow furrowed. The Baltaris system was a peaceful Sindari colony, primarily agricultural, with a population of several million. "Put it through." The transmission was fragmented, distorted by interference, but the panic in the voice was unmistakable. "This is Governor Laris of Baltaris. We are under attack. Unknown entities, massive casualties, defenses failing." The message dissolved into static before abruptly cutting off. "Contact the Sindri High Council immediately." Cale ordered, his voice steady despite the unease growing in his chest, "and prepare a formal request for military assistance." As his crew sprang into action, Cale returned his gaze to the stars. In the Sindari Alliance's 10,000-year history, there had been conflicts, certainly, but outright attacks on peaceful colonies were exceedingly rare. Whatever was happening in Baltaris, it threatened the very harmony the Alliance had worked so diligently to maintain. "Sir," the communications officer called, again, his voice strained. "The Council acknowledges our transmission, but they're saying emergency response will be delayed by at least 72 hours due to the Proxima Diplomatic Summit." Cale felt his jaw tighten. 72 hours. For a colony under attack, that could mean total annihilation. "Send the distress signal across all emergency frequencies," he commanded. "Perhaps someone closer than the Council can render aid." Little did he know that this decision, this simple act of seeking help wherever it might be found, would shatter the foundations of everything he believed about his world, his people, and the history he thought he knew. The day that followed was one of mounting tension. Reports from Baltaris grew increasingly desperate, then sporadic, then silent altogether. The Sindari High Council maintained their position no immediate assistance could be dispatched. Cale was reviewing evacuation protocols for the third time when the sensor operator's voice cut through the command center's tense atmosphere. "Captain, multiple warp signatures detected at the edge of our sensor range." "Sindari vessels?" Cale asked, hope flaring briefly. "Negative, sir. Configuration unknown." "Wait." The operator's eyes widened. "Sir, they're moving at speeds far beyond Sindari capabilities. 27 vessels approaching rapidly." Cale moved to the observation window just as the first ships appeared. They were unlike anything he had ever seen, sleek angular vessels of varying sizes, their hulls dark against the stars, moving with a precision that spoke of advanced technology and experienced crews. "We're receiving a transmission from the lead vessel," the communications officer reported, his voice trembling slightly. "Put it through." The holographic display flickered to life, revealing a face that sent a shock through every person on the command deck. The being before them was bipedal with hairless facial features, rounded ears, and skin in various shades of tan and brown, rather than the blue-silver tones of the Allion. The uniform was unfamiliar, but the confident posture was unmistakably that of a military commander. A human, a species that had been excluded from the Sindari Alliance millennia ago. Labeled as too dangerous, too unpredictable to be permitted among civilized worlds. Deathworlders, beings who had evolved on a planet so hostile that they had developed aggressive tendencies and formidable survival skills simply to exist. "This is Admiral Sarah Thorne of the Earth Federation Expeditionary Fleet." The human announced, her voice clear and authoritative. We received your distress signal and have come to render assistance to Balteris. Please provide us with any tactical information you have regarding the situation." Stunned silence fell over the command center. Kale found himself momentarily speechless, caught between relief that help had arrived and the ancient fear his people harbored toward humans. Before he could respond, his second-in-command activated the emergency protocol, sending an urgent alert to Sindari High Command. Humans had breached the Forbidden Zone. Admiral Thorne. Kale finally managed choosing his words carefully. "This is Captain Kale Draven of Sentinel-9 Sindari Alliance. We appreciate your response to our distress call. However, I must inform you that under Sindari law, human vessels are prohibited from entering Alliance space without explicit authorization." The human's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Perhaps disappointment, perhaps resignation. "Captain Draven, we are well aware of the Sindari's position regarding Earth. However, we received a distress signal, and under Earth Federation law, we are obligated to respond. Perhaps your people have forgotten, but on our world, SOS calls are sacred. We do not ignore them regardless of who sends them." Before Kale could formulate a response, the communications officer interrupted. "Sir, incoming transmission from High Command. Admiral Rin is en route with a battle group. They're ordering us to delay the human fleet by any means necessary until reinforcements arrive." Kale felt his heart sink. Admiral Rin was known throughout the Alliance as a hardliner when it came to maintaining the species barrier. If he arrived with a battle group, while the humans were still present, conflict would be inevitable. "Admiral Thorne, Kale said Sindari reinforcements are on their way. I strongly advise you to withdraw your fleet to the border until proper diplomatic channels can be established." "With all due respect, Captain," Thorne replied firmly, "every moment we delay could mean more lives lost on Balteris. We didn't come to start a war with the Sindari. We came to help people in danger. Now, are you going to provide us with tactical information, or do we proceed without it?" The impasse was interrupted by the arrival of a sleek diplomatic shuttle requesting emergency docking. The visitor was unexpected Leah Veros, a special agent from the Sindari Intelligence Service. What made her appearance even more startling was her heritage. Leah was half alien, half human, one of the few such hybrids permitted to exist within the Alliance, and only because of her exceptional abilities and her utility as a cultural bridge when rare communications with Earth became necessary. As she strode onto the command deck, her dual heritage was evident. The silver-blue tint to her skin was subtle, her features a harmonious blend of both species. Her status as an outsider within her own society was something she had carried her entire life, yet she moved with confident purpose. "Captain Draven," she acknowledged with a nod, "I've been dispatched from Central Intelligence to help manage this situation. I see the humans have already arrived." "Agent Veros." Kale greeted her stiffly. "Admiral Rin is en route with a battle group. The humans refuse to withdraw." Leah's expression tightened. "Admiral Rin is precisely what we don't need right now." She turned to the communications array. "Open a channel to the human fleet." When Admiral Thorne's face appeared again, Leah stepped forward. "Admiral Thorne, I am Agent Leah Veros of Sindari Intelligence. I understand your position, but I must warn you that a Sindari battle group is approaching with orders to engage if you do not withdraw. Perhaps we can find a compromise. Allow a small contingent of your forces to proceed to Balteris, while the main fleet remains at a safe distance." Thorne considered for a moment. "A reasonable suggestion, Agent Veros. We'll dispatch 3 of our fastest vessels with medical and tactical teams. The rest of the fleet will hold position here." "Thank you, Admiral," Leah said, relief evident in her voice. But just as it seemed a conflict might be avoided, alarms blared throughout the station. "Explosion detected on the perimeter of the human fleet," the sensor operator reported. "One of the Sindari automated defense platforms has opened fire." "That's impossible," Kale insisted. "Those platforms are on standby mode." The human fleet immediately shifted into defensive formation, but remarkably did not return fire. Admiral Thorne's face reappeared on the screen, her expression grim. "Captain Draven, we did not come here for conflict, but we will defend ourselves if necessary." The defense platform's activation code originated from within the Sindari network. Leah announced, her fingers flying across a data terminal. "There wasn't an accident. Someone deliberately triggered it." "Admiral Rin," Kale suggested, his voice low. Leah shook her head. "His fleet is still hours away. This is someone else. Someone who doesn't want humans and Sindari cooperating." Before they could investigate further, a massive Sindari warship emerged from warp space, followed by 6 smaller vessels. It wasn't Admiral Rin's battle group. It was an advance force, likely dispatched at the first alert. "Sindari vessels are charging the weapons." The sensor operator reported tension evident in his voice. "Open a channel," Kale demanded. "We need to explain the situation." But the Sindari commander wasn't interested in explanations. "This is Commander Valix of the Sindari Defense Force. Human vessels, you have illegally entered Alliance space. Surrender immediately or be destroyed." What followed was chaos. The human fleet, outgunned and outnumbered, displayed tactical prowess that left even the experienced Sindari officers in awe. They moved with incredible coordination, using the stellar debris field to their advantage, employing maneuvers that seemed to defy conventional space combat doctrine. "They're not trying to win," Leah observed, her eyes fixed on the tactical display. "They're creating an opening for their relief ships to slip through to Baltaris while minimizing casualties on both sides." Indeed, in the confusion of battle, 3 human vessels broke away, accelerating toward the Baltaris system with remarkable speed. The conflict escalated when Commander Valix, frustrated by his inability to decisively defeat the human fleet, ordered his forces to target Sentinel-9, claiming that Kyle and his crew had been compromised by human influence. As the station's shields began to fail under the Sindari assault, Admiral Thorne made a decision that would later be studied in tactical academies across the galaxy. Rather than fleeing or continuing to engage the Sindari ships, the human fleet moved to protect the station, positioning themselves between Sentinel-9 and the attacking vessels. "What are they doing?" one of Kale's officers whispered. "Why would they protect us?" Kyle had no answer. Everything he had been taught about humans, their aggression, their selfishness, their disregard for other species, was being contradicted before his eyes. Meanwhile, Leah had been conducting her own investigation, hacking into restricted Sindari communication channels. What she discovered sent a chill through her mixed blood. "Captain," she said urgently, "I've identified the source of the command that activated the defense platform. It came from a secured channel used exclusively by the Pure Order." The Pure Order, a secretive faction within the Sindari Alliance dedicated to maintaining biological purity and species segregation. Long rumored to have infiltrated the highest levels of Sindari government, they had always denied accusations of extremism. "They're deliberately provoking a war with Earth," Leah continued. "And there's more, the attack on Baltaris. It wasn't some unknown entity. It was a bioweapon released by Pure Order operatives designed to mimic the aftermath of a violent invasion." Kale felt his worldview crumbling. Why would they do this?" "Because humans represent everything the Pure Order fears," Leah replied. "Adaptation, change, evolution through chaos rather than controlled development. They've been feeding the Alliance propaganda about the dangers of Deathworlders for millennia to maintain their power." The revelation left KL reeling, but there was no time to process it. Admiral Rin's battle group had arrived, dwarfing both the human fleet and Commander Valix's forces. "All vessels cease fire immediately!" Rin's commanding voice boomed across all communication channels. "Humans, you will withdraw from Sindari space or face the full might of the Alliance." It was Leah who acted first, using her security clearances to force an emergency 3-way communication link between Sentinel-9, Admiral Thorne's vessel, and Admiral Rin's command ship. Admiral Rin, she said, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. Before you take any action, there's something you need to know. The Pure Order has orchestrated this entire crisis to provoke a war with Earth. They used a bioweapon on Baltaris, manipulated the defense grid to fire on the human fleet, and now they're counting on you to complete their plan. Rin's face, lined with years of military service and deeply ingrained speciesism, showed skepticism. Agent Veros, these are serious accusations with no evidence. The evidence is on its way, Leah countered. The human ships that broke through to Baltaris, they're not just providing aid. They're gathering samples of the bioweapon and documentation of what really happened. More human lies, Commander Valix interjected. Admiral Rin, these humans have clearly manipulated Captain Draven and Agent Veros. We must strike now. But something about Leah's certainty gave Rin pause. Hold positions, he ordered his fleet. No one fires without my direct command. It was in this tense standoff that the 3 human vessels returned from Baltaris, transmitting their findings across all frequencies so that no one could claim ignorance. The evidence was damning surveillance footage of Pure Order agents releasing the bioweapon genetic markers that linked it to a Sindari military research facility, and records of communications ordering the subsequent cover-up. Most shocking of all was the discovery that the Pure Order had been experimenting with hybridizing traditional Sindari biological weapons with stolen human DNA, attempting to create pathogens that could target specific genetic markers. They sought not just to maintain separation between species, but eventually to eliminate those they deemed impure. As the evidence mounted, Admiral Rin's rigid posture seemed to crumble slightly. He was a military man devoted to the Alliance, but not blind to the corruption that had taken root within it. Captain Draven, he said finally, arrange an emergency meeting with the human admiral and Agent Veros aboard your station. It seems we have much to discuss. The meeting that followed was unprecedented, the first official diplomatic contact between humans and the Sindari Alliance in over 3,000 years. Admiral Thorne, accompanied by her senior officers, faced Admiral Rin across the conference table in Sentinel-9's command center. Kale and Leah sat between them, no longer merely observers, but active participants in what would become a historic turning point. The Pure Order represents a cancer within our society, Rin admitted, his voice heavy with the weight of recognition. For too long, we have allowed their ideology of fear to shape our policies toward Earth and other worlds we deemed too dangerous. Fear is a powerful motivator, Admiral Thorne agreed. On Earth, we have our own history of allowing fear to drive us to terrible actions. Perhaps that's why we evolved to never ignore a call for help, because we know how desperately we've needed it ourselves. The discussion turned to immediate concerns, treating the survivors on Baltaris, apprehending the Pure Order operatives, responsible in preventing further attacks. But underlying these practical matters was a deeper question. Could millennia of separation and mistrust be overcome? It was Kael who finally addressed the nexus of the issue. I've served the Alliance my entire life believing I was upholding peace and stability. But true stability cannot be built on deception. The Pure Order manipulated us all because they knew we would believe the worst about humans without question. He turned to Admiral Thorne. On behalf of Sentinel-9, I formally apologize for the hostile reception you received when you came only to help. Apology accepted, Captain, Thorne replied with a genuine smile. But now we need to focus on what comes next. What came next was revolution, not through violence, but through truth. Kale and Leah compiled all the evidence of the Pure Order's manipulation and presented it directly to the Sindari High Council, bypassing the usual protocols that would have allowed the information to be suppressed. The revelation sent shockwaves throughout Sindari society. Public outcry led to investigations at every level of government, exposing Pure Order sympathizers who had spent centuries reinforcing anti-human propaganda. Those found complicit in the Baltaris attack were stripped of power and brought to justice. For Kale, the months that followed were a time of profound personal transformation. The rigid captain, who had unquestioningly accepted the established order, found himself advocating for its fundamental reform. His experiences had shown him that loyalty to principles, truth, justice, compassion, must supersede loyalty to institutions when those institutions failed to uphold those same principles. The human fleet, having completed their humanitarian mission on Balteris, prepared to depart. But before they left, the newly reconstituted Sindari High Council made an unprecedented offer, an official alliance with Earth, beginning with joint scientific and cultural exchange programs. "This isn't just an alliance," Leah observed as she and Kale watched the signing ceremony. "It's an acknowledgement that we're stronger together than apart. That the very qualities that made humans seem dangerous, their adaptability, their innovative thinking, their willingness to take risks, are exactly what the Alliance needs." Kale nodded thoughtfully. "The Pure Order feared that contact with Deathworlders would change us. They were right, but change isn't something to fear. It's how we grow." 1 year later, Sentinel Semper was transformed from a remote monitoring station to the primary hub for human Sindari cooperation. Kyle, now promoted to the rank of commander, found himself in charge of overseeing the integration efforts. Leah, recognized for her crucial role in uncovering the conspiracy, was appointed as the official diplomatic liaison between Earth and the Alliance. The transition wasn't without challenges. Centuries of ingrained prejudice couldn't be erased overnight. There were cultural misunderstandings, political opposition from traditionalists on both sides, and the occasional flare-up of old tensions. But with each successful joint mission, with each scientific breakthrough achieved through collaboration, with each cultural festival that celebrated both traditions, the barriers continued to erode. Perhaps the most significant change came in how the Sindari viewed themselves and their place in the galaxy. For too long, they had isolated themselves from species they deemed old, less evolved, or too dangerous, believing their way of life superior and worth preserving at all costs. The alliance with humans forced them to confront the stagnation this isolation had caused technologically, culturally, and philosophically. Humans, for their part, brought with them not just advanced propulsion systems and innovative tactical thinking, but a perspective forged in the crucible of a challenging homeworld. Where the Sindari saw disorder, humans often saw opportunity. Where the Sindari sought to eliminate risk, humans found ways to manage and even harness it. "They call us Deathworlders," Admiral Thorne once remarked during a diplomatic reception, as if surviving in harsh conditions is something to be ashamed of. But perhaps what the galaxy needs isn't just beings who've known peace, but also those who understand struggle. Not to bring war, but to remember why peace is worth fighting for. Kale found wisdom in those words. Standing on the observation deck where he had once watched the stars alone, he now often found himself surrounded by a diverse group of officers, Sindari human, and even a few representatives from other species who had been inspired by the new alliance to seek their own diplomatic connections. "The strongest beings aren't those who have never known hardship," he told a group of cadets during a training session. "They're those who have faced adversity and chosen to become protectors rather than destroyers. The humans taught us that. They could have used their strength to conquer, but instead they used it to respond to a call for help from those who had rejected them." For Leah, the changes were even more personal. Having lived her entire life between two worlds, neither fully accepting her, she now found herself valued precisely because of her dual heritage. Young Sindari human hybrids, once hidden away or discouraged, now looked to her as a pioneer. She established a cultural center on Sentinel-9 specifically dedicated to exploring the unique perspectives that came from belonging to multiple worlds. "Difference isn't dilution," she would say. "It's dimension. Each part of our heritage adds depth to who we are." The legacy of the SOS signal from Balteris extended far beyond the immediate crisis it had triggered. In Sindari historical archives, it came to mark the beginning of what scholars called the Reconciliation Era, a time when ancient barriers fell and new possibilities emerged. The Pure Order, though, diminished, did not disappear entirely. Its ideology, fear of change, obsession with purity, rejection of the unknown, was too deeply embedded in certain segments of society to be completely eradicated. But its power was broken. Its influence contained its philosophy, increasingly viewed as a relic of a less enlightened age. 5 years after the first human ships entered Sindari space, a memorial was erected on Baltaris. It honored those who had perished in the Pure Order's attack, but it also celebrated what had risen from that tragedy, a partnership between former enemies that had made both societies stronger. At the dedication ceremony, Kale and Leah stood alongside Admiral Thorne and Admiral Rin, the four of them symbolizing the bridge that had been built between their peoples. When that SOS signal went out, Kale said in his address, "None of us could have imagined where it would lead. We expected rescue. What we received was revelation about ourselves, about those we had feared, and about the future we could build together." As night fell and the stars emerged above the memorial, Leah found Kale standing alone, gazing upward, just as he had done for so many years on Sentinel-9. Number 19. "Still keeping watch, Captain?" she asked with a smile. "Old habits," he replied, "but I'm looking at the stars differently now, not as boundaries to be guarded, but as bridges waiting to be crossed." Leah nodded, understanding perfectly. "The Pure Order was right about one thing, you know. Meeting the Deathworlders did change us, just not in the way they feared." "How so?" "They thought contact with humans would make us more like them, chaotic, unpredictable, dangerous. Instead, it reminded us of something we had forgotten, that strength without compassion isn't strength at all. That the most powerful force in the universe isn't the ability to destroy, but the courage to protect." Kale considered her words, then smiled. Perhaps that's the true legacy of the SOS. Not just a call for help, but a reminder of our capacity to answer it, no matter who sends it, no matter how far we must go. As they stood together beneath the alien sky, the memorial's eternal flame casting long shadows across the newly rebuilt settlement, the message encoded in the design became clear to all who saw it. The strongest beings in the universe are not those evolved to destroy, but those who choose to defend. And in the vast depths of space where countless civilizations rose and fell and rose again, a new protocol was established among the stars. Inspired by the Earth tradition that had changed the course of history, it stated simply, "When you hear an SOS, you respond. Not because you must, not because it benefits you, but because someday you might be the one sending it." In the centuries that followed, as humans in Sindari ventured forth together into unexplored regions of the galaxy, they carried this principle with them like a beacon. And when other species asked why these former enemies now stood as one, they would tell the story of Sentinel-9, of the SOS that bridged worlds, and of how the beings once feared as Deathworlders had shown the galaxy that true power lies not in the strength to take life, but in the will to preserve it.